Welcome to CAT Television, Community Access. John Hanger, candidate for governor, is our guest today. John, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
It's always a good one, you know. So, running for governor on the Democratic ticket, have about 8 other candidates right now for you. I've watched some of the debates. I've seen some of the other guys. Let's start this conversation off with how you set yourself apart from them, and basically just what are your plans for winning?
Right. Well, there are 7 other candidates, a total of 8, and we have some very big differences with the other campaigns. I think the first big difference is that we're a true people's campaign.
Right.
A number of the other campaigns are big money operations. They're throwing huge amounts of money on TV and just really trying to buy the election with these huge donations. I'm not going to bring big money influence into the governor's office. The second thing that's really different about our campaign is that I have very detailed plans and solutions that will address education, save our public schools, deal with college affordability, create 382,000 jobs. You've got the Hanger Jobs Plan. And I've got unique experience in energy and the environment at a time that Pennsylvania needs energy expertise in the governor's chair. The last thing that I want to say is our whole campaign can be boiled down to one sentence, and it's schools, not jails, jobs, not jails, legalize and tax marijuana.
Right.
And it's that last piece, legalize and tax marijuana, that has brought a lot of energy to our campaign. We can, in fact, stop wasting $300 million by ruining people's lives and arresting them for a joint in their pocket. I understand the difference between criminals who put a gun to your head and having a joint in their pocket. And I think, I know people of Pennsylvania understand that difference, but our laws don't. And we've got to change that. And we can start, in fact, taxing marijuana, and we could create about $300 million of new revenue. Last but not least, we could grow hemp again in Pennsylvania.
Right.
You were mentioning Hempfield.
Hempfield is where I'm from, yeah, Hempfield Area School District in Westmoreland County, named after the cash crop that used to be grown pretty regularly in the area. So let's talk, I guess marijuana is a great place to start. You know, let's talk about that $300 million number. Where are you getting it from, and what are we learning from other states like Colorado and Washington who have already gone ahead and legalized it for the public?
Well, there's 2 parts of the cost equation for taxpayers. Our marijuana laws today are a disaster for taxpayers, regardless of what you think about marijuana. If you're a taxpayer, these laws are terrible. And so the first thing is we spend about $300 million a year enforcing these laws that are cruel and expensive, that stop doctors from prescribing cannabis.
So the people in jail for...
Yeah, it's the arrests, it's the prosecutions, it's the parole, it's all the legal costs, the appeals, the private attorneys, the public defenders, the whole...
Legal fees.
The whole 9 yards. It adds up to $300 million worth of expense that we would get rid of by legalizing and taxing. Then the second is, because we don't legalize, we don't tax. If we were to have this marijuana out of the underground economy as part of a licensed business, or perhaps sold through the state stores, we would tax it. And in Colorado, they have had tax revenues from marijuana skyrocket.
Yeah.
They've got $134 million.
Tripled almost, right?
Yeah, it's double what they expected. It's
yeah.
at $134 million. And Pennsylvania is 2.5 times as big. We've got 2.5 times as many people as Colorado. So we would have probably around $300 million of new tax revenues. When you add the avoided costs with the new revenues, it's actually over $500 million. It's about $600 million.
About $600 million.
This is a big deal.
This is basically $600 million that the state is losing out on and can be used for other purposes. You know, in Colorado, I know about a lot of the money went toward education. It went toward like alcohol prevention programs, you know, like
drug treatment.
Sure. So is that the revenue coming from it? Is you know, I know education's a big part of your platform too.
It is.
And
I actually think that the money can be used for a variety of needs. I'm proposing a gas drilling tax, a lot of which of that I would put to education. I do think this money that we would save and create through legalization and taxation can go to some education, but I also think it should go to things like alcohol treatment programs, as well as drug addiction programs. One of the things I think is important to understand here, it's back to this question of differences between me and the other candidates.
Sure.
None of the other candidates are for legalizing tax, but they sometimes try to confuse people a little bit, to be frank. They will use the word decriminalize.
Please clear this message up, yeah.
Right. They will say, we're for decriminalizing.
Okay.
Let me explain why that's not the same as legalizing tax. Decriminalize is false advertising.
Okay.
What it really means is marijuana possession and sale remains illegal, but the penalties are decreased. I want to legalize in tax to have the penalties go away. Under decriminalization scheme, there is no new tax revenue. There still are tickets or arrests made and charges brought.
That money's still staying on the black market.
It's all in the black market, so it's not even a real good half measure, at this point. We need.
It's not even an appropriate compromise.
I don't believe it is.
Okay.
I mean, I certainly. That's better than where we are today, because where we are today is such a disaster. But we need to move to a real solution, legalizing tax. And that's actually an example of the difference between my campaign and the others. I'm offering bold, transformational change. What's going on in Pennsylvania right now can't be fixed by sort of half measures and small, timid steps.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I know, the medical aspect of marijuana is, SB 1182, which is in the House right now. The Charlotte's, in the Senate, yes, excuse me. It's called the Charlotte's Web, bill, because Charlotte's Web is this strand to limit seizures in young people. And I've read a lot of stories. I've seen the documentaries, of mothers crying because their kids can now, live a normal life.
Right. There are about 500,000 people in Pennsylvania who have medical conditions that are treatable by some form of cannabis and are being treated in other states.
500,000.
About roughly 500,000. These are people, cancer patients. They are vets with post-traumatic stress disorder. They are children with seizure disorders.
Right.
And I've met people in all of those groups and others. The children with seizure disorders break my heart. And I've met with these families. They are desperate. And what is unbelievable to me is that this governor has refused to actually personally meet with the families and the children who suffer from various kinds of seizure disorders.
He doesn't even, he wants to kind of pretend they're not there.
He does. He's gotten such bad publicity. He recently asked his health secretary to meet with him. But this is a governor who will meet with a gas driller at any time of day, any place. But he can't meet with the families who have children whose health and indeed their lives are in the balance. It's terrible. So SB 1182 is an important bill. I'm calling for the state Senate to pass it as quickly as possible, and then the House to do the same. The governor has said he will veto it, but let's put it on his desk and challenge him to veto it.
It's got to start somewhere, right?
And you got to force the issue.
Right.
You got to force the issue. Let's get votes in the Senate. Let's see where people stand.
Yeah.
And then it's up to the voters to hold people accountable. And
well, it seems like the people are more or less in favor of it. It's just a matter of getting it through Harrisburg at this
I've never
point.
seen an issue, and now we're talking about medical marijuana,
right,
where the public is so overwhelmingly in favor.
It's in favor of
it's
it.
at close to a 90% polling issue right now. That's almost unheard of.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find
especially
anything.
in the political world.
Yeah,
in the bipartisan country that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure mom and apple pie gets 90% support these days, But medical marijuana does get 90% support. And this is a point that I think is important about our campaign. We're a people's campaign because what we've noticed is that the political leaders on both sides of the aisle are disconnected from the people,
From their constituents.
From the constituents. Actually, in Colorado, the Democratic governor of Colorado urged a vote against the marijuana referendum. The Democratic mayor of Denver urged a vote against the marijuana referendum. So we've got to...
Did he list a reason?
Well, it's some of the old myths that come out of those Democratic mouths. We've got to shake the system up.
Yeah.
And this
old school lobbying probably plays a part in this.
And you know, very frankly, some of these folks are 50, 60, 70 years old. I'm 56, but I like to think I have stayed modern. And people, you talk to people under 35, under 40, the opinions on these issues are overwhelmingly in favor of legalizing tax.
Well, you know, I'm glad that you brought that up because it is seemingly the older demographic that has been preventing this prohibition from ending, really, in recent years. You know, and I'll speak to the critics a little bit, you know, saying that marijuana is a gateway drug. You know, how it's going to lead into harder drugs, you know, and I think that's a major reason why marijuana is still listed as a Class 1 drug, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, which is a complete mistake of chemistry and science.
Exactly.
I mean, actually, Governor Schaefer, who was a Republican governor of Pennsylvania, was asked by President Nixon, now we're going back nearly 50 years, to lead a commission that looked at cannabis or marijuana, and he said it shouldn't be a Class 1 drug. It has medicinal value. It is not addictive in the way that heroin and cocaine are. But look, if I want cannabis and marijuana to be kept out of the hands of children. Today, there are no controls. It is in the hands of children. If you legalize and tax and regulate, you put the sale of marijuana in the hands of a licensed business or a state store, then you are going to have better control of the distribution and sale of marijuana. You will have more. You'll be more able to keep it out of the hands of children. What we're doing today absolutely ensures that children are going to get it. So one of the reasons I'm for legalize, regulate, and tax is that I believe it will be a better system to control its distribution.
Yeah, similar to like how the state distributes alcohol, you know,
or tobacco,
or
a licensed business.
Anything that you need to show ID for.
Yeah, if a licensed business starts selling marijuana to an underage person, they're putting their whole business at risk.
Right.
Obviously, somebody today in the underground economy will sell pretty much to anybody with the money.
They're not asking for an ID, right?
No.
Well, you know,
for the money, and if the money's there, it's sold.
Yeah, and it's a big problem, and you know, it's almost in high school. You know, it's in the lockers. You know, they bring the dogs through to check it. You know, and that's obviously an underage crowd. Well, you know, for the most part, anyways. And as far as you know, and I look at alcohol and pills, and you talked about post-traumatic stress syndrome and vets coming back. And chronic diseases where there really isn't a good pill solution, and it just puts people down that road. And I've heard people in studies say that like those pills are almost more of a problem and a gateway drug than pot ever will be.
Well, they clearly are.
Yeah.
Obviously, many of the prescription drugs are highly addictive.
Yes.
And you can overdose on them. You can end up in the hospital. You can even end up dead from some of these prescription drugs, unfortunately. I ask coroners, have you ever put on the death certificate the person died from marijuana? And they literally laugh.
Yeah.
Now, you ask a coroner, have you put on the death certificate alcohol? Oh, yeah.
Happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Heroin, yes. So everybody knows, at least most people do now, that we're talking about marijuana that is actually less dangerous than alcohol.
Let's pivot a little bit.
Yes.
Let's go to education.
Great.
It's one of your big bullet points on your platform. It's your number one important issue, like I said. And what specific problems do we have in the educational system right now? And differentiate us from your other candidates to what your plans are.
Well, let me start with higher education, and I think the major problem we have with higher education is affordability, and that's
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, so many people who have come out of school with student loans and are finding it hard or impossible to pay them back in this economy, and still others are not actually going to college because of concern about taking on so much debt.
Right.
So I have
the future worry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those twin concerns are so significant that it's undermining our whole economy. So I've got the Hanger College Affordability Plan, and what that would do is allow every Pennsylvanian to go to 2 years of community college or 1 year of our state universities and pay for it once they become workers. So no upfront tuition, no upfront student loan debt. The fund would pay the tuition, and then the student would pay back into the fund when they become a worker. They pay about 1% to 2% of their earnings.
So kind of like a loan from the state.
It's not a loan in the formal sense, because you're not going to get a debt. It's very important that this is about not having people take on debt.
Okay.
But they sign a contract, which is legally enforceable, and that they will pay 1% to 2% of their income for 15 years back into the fund that paid for their tuition.
So that's 1% to 2% of their income, and that's what they pay off for the next...
For 15 years.
15 years, okay.
And we've had economists create the fund and run the numbers, do the actuarial math, and
make sure the numbers line up.
They
right.
all line up, and by the 15th year, the fund is actually self-supporting.
Again, I'm Alec Italiano, editor-in-chief of the Marketplace Gazette, and I'm here with my guest, John Hanger, Democratic candidate for governor. And I really like the 1% to 2% method because everybody comes out of school making a different wage. The engineer is going to make a different salary than a comm major might. And I've had a lot of conversations with Don Burks, who's the chancellor at Penn State Barron here in town, and that was an idea that we had talked about too. Kind of base it off a percentage rather than a fixed number.
Right. So again, we're offering bold transformational change, whether it's marijuana legalizing tax and the Hanger College Affordability Plan for 2 years of community college. These are big ideas that can make a big difference in Pennsylvania's future and the lives of individual Pennsylvanians. But also there's problems with K through 12 education, basic public education.
And early childhood education
and
too.
Early and pre-kindergarten education. Absolutely. And in fact, we only have 18% of our 3 and 4 year olds in high quality early childhood education. There are 250,000 3 and 4 year olds in Pennsylvania that have no early childhood education.
So what kind of education is that, like, specifically? Are we talking like preschool?
Yes, preschool. Okay. And of course, I think we all sort of know at some level that the brain is particularly able to absorb information at a young age. So the earlier you can expose that brain to the information, the quicker they're going to pick it up in their right. And that's particularly important, frankly, for children who may live in homes that are struggling economically. They may live in poverty because those homes often don't have the resources to provide the enrichment. Some kids are fortunate and go home to violin lessons. Other kids go home to a cold home with no food in the refrigerator.
Right.
And those are two very different home experiences. And it's for poor children, it's absolutely vital that you have high quality early childhood education.
So it's solving an inequality problem.
It's part of solving the inequality problem. I think the other obviously problem we've had with Corbett is he's cut funding to our schools by over $1 billion.
$1 billion, that's the number.
Right, that was the number. I would restore that. We also have to have a fair distribution formula. So those communities that have more children with special education needs actually receive a greater portion of the state funding. And last but not least is I think all schools need to be held accountable. We need to improve all schools. And this is particularly important also for charter schools. Right now, local taxpayers are paying a lot of money for charter schools. Some of those charter schools do a great job, and I certainly support a good performing charter school that has good test results, good graduation
But you want to take
rates.
a little bit of a closer look at them.
I absolutely do, and there's data now showing that at least a number of these charter schools actually have poor reading scores, poor math scores, and poor graduation rates.
So their biggest competitive advantage is actually kind of a myth or a lie.
Yeah, in some cases. In some cases. Where the charter school is not doing a good job, you need to say thank you for trying. But the money is taxpayer money, it's local school taxes, and that needs to come back to the local community.
One last thing before we move on from education. You had a plan for citizens to go to community college, 2 years of community college or 1 year of of a state school?
Yes.
Well, explain that a little bit more.
Well, again, that's the first step in this plan, that everybody could do that and then pay for from their wages 1% to 2%. We hope that we can expand that plan, that fund, so that in fact it would be 2 years of community college and then eventually 2 years of public university and one day hopefully 4 years of public university.
Hopefully, yeah.
But you've got to start with a big first step,
Right.
and 2 years of community college and 1 year of state university without any debt. Without any debt.
Without any debt. I think that's very important.
That's the key.
Especially when we see the economy grow. A lot of people, future business leaders of America, coming out of college and having handcuffs around their back because they can't.
Right.
They have no room to maneuver.
Right.
And it brings us up to speed with more like what the rest of the world is doing with their educational system. In that regard, I really truly feel like America's behind. From that standpoint. But I want to move on to energy. This is your specialty.
Yes.
Secretary of the DEP for...
Governor Rendell, Commissioner of the Public Utility Commission with Governor Casey.
Yeah. And you also own an environmental company?
Well, I ran a nonprofit called Penn Future,
Penn Future.
an environmental organization.
What does that organization do? And, fracking is a huge issue.
Right.
Across Pennsylvania as we see it exploding. And as usual, we usually see industry move a little faster than regulators can keep up. So tell us where you think the industry is going and what your plan is to make sure they stay in line.
Right. Well, I've spent my entire professional career working on energy and also environmental protection. I did run Citizens for Pennsylvania's Future, or Penn Future, for period of time. I left Penn Future in 2008, about 6 years ago, but I have that experience of working on behalf of the environment. The energy issue is so fundamental to Pennsylvania, and especially the gas drilling issue, because of obviously the enormous amount of shale gas that's here in Pennsylvania. When I was Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, wrote the moratorium on shale gas drilling for the state forest, along with my colleague Secretary Quigley. And that gives you some idea that I oppose gas drilling in certain areas. I don't want it in our state forests. I don't want it in our state parks. And I actually have plans to keep it out of our state forests and state parks. And I'm uniquely qualified to get that job done. On people's private lands, when a farmer signs a lease, I think it's very, very important that the local communities be able to zone. They have to have the authority to separate gas drilling from residential properties, and I support the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's recent decision striking down as unconstitutional Act 13.
That was a big one.
It was. But it's also important that the state do a much better job, a much tougher job overseeing this industry. So I would ban, for example, outdoor drilling pits where there's wastewater is stored. I would require that the drilling companies use available pollution control equipment on things like compressor stations to capture and stop air emissions. You can stop about 90% of the air emissions.
So there are ways.
There are ways, but you've got to make the industry do it to at least make it better. And then I'm an energy expert. So today we get 90% of our energy from coal, oil, natural gas, or nuclear.
90%.
90%. 10% comes from renewable energy, but most of that actually is coming from hydro and corn ethanol. So I know that you have to strongly regulate coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. I actually live in the 3 Mile Island nuclear evacuation area, which had a nuclear...
A lot of us remember that.
Yeah, we had a nuclear meltdown. Some of us have probably seen the film China Syndrome. That's a movie about what happened at 3 Mile Island. So the traditional energy sources all pose different kinds of risks. And that's one of the reasons I'm passionate about getting to the future, getting to wind, solar, energy efficiency, accelerating the future. I fought for every wind farm in Pennsylvania, 24 of them. And I've got plans to increase wind by 4 times and increase solar by 10 times if I'm governor.
And the jobs that go along with creating that as well.
Exactly right. This governor has got a terrible jobs record. He's got one of the worst jobs records in the entire country. And one of the reasons is that he's attacked education. The second reason is his only economic development policy is drill, baby, drill. He has thrown wind and solar and other energy opportunities on the bus. He said no to Medicaid expansion. I'd say yes. We needed to also recognize that Mental health issues are serious, and this governor's been attacking mental health services. So we can completely turn that around.
With just one, with a couple, well, not one vote, conglomerate of votes, but yeah. The other issues I want to just touch on, with fracking is water supply issue, and also other things that maybe the general public doesn't think of off the bat, like property value. What is this doing to the housing market? What kind of ripple effect is this having? Is this just a boom industry, or is this something that we can do right and benefit us in the long term?
Well, the industry and the gas has been here for a long time.
Well,
and I think
it's a staple of Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we do need to remember our history here. Pennsylvania had the very first oil well. We don't do much oil production, but there's still some.
Yeah.
And we've had gas drilling going on in Pennsylvania for a very long time. Now, shale gas drilling with the horizontal
is what
different,
makes this different.
Right.
And also what causes a lot of problems, from what I hear. It's that bend in the pipe that kind of creates a lot of issues.
I think there's a range of issues, and they deal with issues with the gas drilling that can cause methane to migrate and get to people's water wells.
Right.
There's spills at the surface. You have to recognize that this is an industrial activity and must be strongly overseen, and this governor hasn't done that and won't do it. So that is all true. In terms of going forward, we have to tax it. We should be getting about $800 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
We have to zone it. We have to keep it out of certain places, like our state forests and parks.
Right. Yeah, and I know the taxing was a big issue in the transportation bill. It was held up in the House for a number of weeks because a lot of representatives, local one and Ryan Bizzarro included, wanted to see more of a tax from those gas companies to kind of fill the numbers gap there.
Well, Governor Corbett says he doesn't raise taxes, but he signed one of the biggest tax increases in the history of Pennsylvania to fund the transpation bill, and he raised everybody's gasoline taxes.
Yeah,
that's the truth.
The gas tax hike was a big issue of that bill.
But he opposes taxing the gas drillers. He's willing to tax you when you fill up your car. That's fine with this governor.
But the industry.
But God forbid we were to tax the gas drilling industry. And let's remember, Texas, Alaska, all these other states that have a lot of gas production, all tax those drilling companies.
And it just kind of makes sense, and I remember reading about shale when it first went into North Dakota and the man camps that these popped up, and the town's population like quadrupled overnight, and it's just, you have infrastructure problems. The sewage was running out through the walls. They needed money for a new school. A whole bunch of different issues that came up, and that wasn't being handed over by the industry, and the public couldn't re-elect officials fast enough to kind of get the regulation done, and I think that was really why we saw some backlash in the early days.
And very frankly, nobody's ready to be governor as ready to be governor as I am on these issues. This is my expertise.
This is your bread and butter.
I'm not going to pander to Pennsylvanians. I'm going to tell them the truth about where we are with energy, what we need to do to accelerate the future, and how we need to, in fact, make sure that coal, oil, gas, and nuclear, all of them, are strongly regulated and paying their fair share of taxes, and local communities are allowed to zone them.
Thank you for joining us on Community Access Television. Again, I'm Alec Italiano, Editor-in-Chief of the Marketplace Gazette, and I'm here with candidate for governor, Democratic candidate for governor, John Hanger. We have a couple people in the crowd right now, and I want them to have the opportunity to ask some questions. Who wants to start us off here? Just let us know who you are and what your question is.
Oh, hi, I'm Dan Eaton. And my question, John, is for you regarding healthcare. Could you please explain to us a little bit more your stance on healthcare? As you know, as we all know, our current healthcare system is in distress, and even more so in the Pittsburgh and Erie area with the ongoing dispute between UPMC and Highmark, two healthcare giants. First of all, explain your stance on healthcare, and would you be willing to support legislation or intervene on behalf of UPMC and Highmark to ensure that patients in our area continue to have access to affordable health care?
So that's a wonderful question, and it's crucially important to have for so many reasons. First, in the short run, I absolutely do support expanding Medicaid. This is Governor Corbett has said no to Medicaid expansion.
Big hot button issue.
It is a very important issue. It's $4 billion that would have come to the state starting on January 1st. That's not coming here. Governor Kasich in Ohio said yes, a Republican. Governor Corbett here has said no because he's sort of kissing the ring of the Tea Party. He's real worried about being accused of not being real right-wing.
Yeah, sure.
He's real right-wing.
Yeah.
I would say yes to Medicaid expansion because that would in fact turn about 500,000 people who don't have health insurance from charity cases into bill payers. That would give them health insurance. That would create 41,000 jobs in our hospitals and in our health care institutions, all kinds of jobs, from technicians to nursing to other jobs. We need more jobs, and often healthcare jobs are reasonably well paid with benefits, and this would have done that. The second thing is, in terms of the future, I strongly believe that the system, our healthcare system, is under stress, and I don't think we've solved it fully by the Affordable Health Care Act.
Yeah.
I think it helps, frankly, but it's another one of those, I think, half steps. And I personally believe you've got to get to some kind of single-payer process which reduce overall costs for all businesses, and it would actually raise quality and improve universal coverage. That's a longer-term step. So I believe in Medicare for all or something like that system. In terms of the hot-button issue right now in this region that's so important.
Right, UPMC and Highmark.
Yeah, I mean, first, shame on both of them. They've obviously put their patients and their consumers last as opposed to first. And at this point, we need strong leadership. And of course, this governor has failed yet again. I would, in fact, bring them together. I would bang their heads together. I would tell them that if you don't fix this yourselves and time is up, we're going to fix it for you. So in answer to your question is yes, absolutely, I would support legislation that fix the problem if they won't fix it themselves. And it kind of looks like that's what's going to be necessary.
Well, the government has a little bit of leverage over at least somebody like UPMC. They're a nonprofit. They don't pay taxes. It's a big issue in Pittsburgh, I know. It's always through the newspapers there. Right. Is that some of the leverage that you might have to resort to? Or?
Yeah, that's part of it. But also Highmark is regulated by the state.
Yeah.
These are, both of these institutions are very important to this region, important to the whole state because how big they are. And they both have a public responsibility. And they're both not meeting that public responsibility. So I don't want the legislature to have to fix everybody's problems, but when
it comes down to it, that's the role of the government.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just one quick follow-up question, and it's just this is from the consumer standpoint. Are they the ones who are at the short end of the stick when UPMC and Highmark start playing with insurance?
Yeah, totally. They're making patients and consumers pawns in their corporate battle.
In their game of chess.
And
they're both going to win at the end of the day.
They say that some of them say they're nonprofits, but they end up with these huge salaries and typically with surpluses. So the consumer and the patient is being treated as a pawn or even a hostage in some cases here, and that's got to stop.
I'd like to take it to another question if we have somebody here. Hi.
Hi, I'm Zach Karenchak, and my question for John is, what are you going to do about the rising cost of higher education for state and state-related universities?
Right. Well, in addition to the Hanger College Affordability Plan that would allow every student to go to 2 years of community college and 1 year of state university and then pay for it when they become workers, I have a proposal that would provide 5% per year funding to our state universities as long as tuition is kept to the rate of inflation. Now, remember, Governor Corbett, amazingly, proposed a 50% cut to our higher ed system and very big cut to the state-related schools. And
that was his proposal. That wasn't something that came
That was his
out.
proposal,
Yeah.
and again, actually, in the budget that is in front of the legislature right now, he's proposed no increase, so not even a small inflation increase.
No inflation.
Which is another cut.
Yeah.
By doing so, he is creating disasters at places like Edinburgh University and other
State schools
all across the Commonwealth. They're laying off faculty, closing down programs.
Sure.
And they have to resort to tuition increases because they don't have any other source of revenue.
It goes back on the shoulders of students
Right.
and richer middle-class parents.
You look around the country, there are many states that have public universities with relatively low tuition rates. And the reason they have low tuition is because they have a bigger state appropriation. The state government is providing a bigger appropriation. We have very low state appropriation and high tuition, even for our public universities. So even to go to a state school, you got students who are taking on huge amounts of debt.
And I went to Penn State, and this stat is a little dated and perhaps a little foggy due to my memory, but I think Penn State was one of the more expensive in-state schools. Like
It's in the top three.
Top three, that's what it was, yeah.
Top three.
And when you compared it to something like Ohio State, it was just ridiculous, like
Yes.
apples and oranges.
So why? What's the difference?
Yeah.
Is it? It's not that Penn State or Pitt, the University of Pittsburgh, is wasteful.
Yeah.
The difference is that in Ohio, the state government provides a much bigger appropriation to
help out with these costs. Yeah.
If you're not going to have a significant appropriation from the state government, then tuition is necessarily going to be high to fill the difference.
Gotcha. I think we have a couple more questions out there. Yeah. Hi, how you doing today?
Hi, John. My name's Steve Jaroszewski, and I'm kind of wondering what you would do about the exploding prison costs here in Pennsylvania, since it's over $2 billion now.
It's a good question. I know the prison issue is a costly thing to get into, but and that's something that politicians have been talking about for a while, and I think the marijuana plays into this, loosening up those regulations. But yeah, speak to the rising prison costs, and why is the incarceration rate higher than it has been in the last couple of decades?
We have now crossed another milestone or Rubicon when it comes to correction expense. This coming budget year will be the first time in the history of the Pennsylvania that taxpayers will spend $2 billion, not million, $2 billion on prisons, state prisons.
$2 billion.
$2 billion.
Does that boil down to a per prisoner?
I haven't done that math, but it often is $35,000 to $40,000
I've
a
heard
year
things like that,
to have somebody in a state prison. It's an extraordinary amount of money because we're actually arresting so many people, jailing them in county jails, or then sending them to state prisons. The prisoner population has exploded. Largely because we got so many non-violent offenders in prison.
Non-violent.
Non-violent. I want to emphasize that.
Yeah.
I've actually had a gun put to my head. And I know the difference between somebody who would do that and somebody walking around with a marijuana in their pocket.
Two different types of criminals.
And in my view, it's time to in fact legalize and tax marijuana, make it no longer a crime, regulate it properly. And that's half of all drug arrests, by the way. Marijuana arrests are half of all drug arrests.
50% of the
50%
people in jail.
And the African Americans have been arrested at 5 times the rate of whites for marijuana possession, even though the usage between the African Americans and whites is essentially the same.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of horrible things
The
about it.
minority is a problem. The stop and search that was happening in New York
Frisks,
City. The frisk, In
New York City, they arrested 400,000 people in Mayor Bloomberg's term for marijuana possession.
One of the highest.
Right. So we've got to turn this on its head. My campaign is about schools, not jails, jobs, not jails, legalize and tax marijuana. And that will start to address some of these prison costs. But we've also got to recognize that we're using prison now to warehouse the mentally ill. We're using prison to deal with addiction problems, which are really health problems that ought to be addressed
in a hospital setting,
as much as possible. So there's a whole bunch of people that are in prison that should be addressed in other ways. I'm a proponent of veterans courts for veterans. and that's a way of actually trying to make sure that veterans who have some difficulty that gets them arrested and into the court system don't end up in jails unless it's absolutely necessary because they're violent. And we need veteran courts in all counties. So there's alternative ways of addressing these issues.
Yeah, I've never heard of the veteran court before, but it's a good point that you brought up. Back to the incarceration rate, though, and I've watched and listened to NPR and other people talk about it, and it's almost more of a social impact than anything. You're taking the breadwinner out of the household, and you're putting this stress on the family. You're putting on a single mother now. You're putting, that might have a couple kids in the house and things like that, and then that affects the local economy. There's less people in the workforce. There's less taxpayers out there.
People with criminal records.
They have a hard time getting jobs afterwards,
right. Look, there's an incredible number of people in prison in the United States. We lead the world, literally lead the world, in jailing and imprisoning our people. We have the highest...
scary stat for a country that mantras its freedom and liberty.
It is a scary stat. And it's also a very expensive stat.
Right.
And actually, this is an area where I think we're beginning to get some across the political spectrum agreement.
Right.
Conservatives and liberals are starting to look at these numbers and say, we can't afford this.
They don't add up.
They don't add up. Who are we jailing? Oh my goodness, look at this. We've got people who passed a bag check in state prison. Oh my goodness, we've got all these people who were caught with some marijuana. Does that make sense? And the answer is more and more people are coming to is no, it doesn't.
Well, again, I'm Alec Italiano, editor-in-chief of the Marketplace Gazette, and we have Democratic candidate for governor John Hanger joining us today. I think we have time for one more question in the crowd. Yeah?
John, I have another question for you. Do you have any plans to get Pennsylvania property owners' mineral rights back? We have a lot of property owners here in the Commonwealth that have gas wells now on their properties, and they do not want them there. Do you got any kind of plan for that?
We need a governor, first and foremost, who's on the side of people, whether they're landowners or who have problems with leases or royalty checks or drilling on their property that they don't want there, or they're landowners who may have experienced some water well problems as a result of gas drilling. So one of the things that I will do is create an independent office, a new independent office, that will receive citizen complaints and fully and professionally investigate those complaints. Where in some cases that it may require legislative action, the details we're going to have to work on. But I'm absolutely totally committed to trying to make sure that the gas resource is used in ways that benefit Pennsylvanians, and that those landowners who don't want gas drilling are not made to have gas drilling.
And so you're proposing a new office to kind of handle these complaints.
Yeah, I'm so tired of these folks who go to the DEP under this governor and get nowhere. I'm so tired of them going to the drilling companies and getting nowhere. And then having to go to the trouble of finding an attorney. It's often very difficult. And it goes on for years and years and years.
Right.
I'm fighting for Max Chilson in Bradford County right now. He's 81 years old. All he wants is a new water well drilled because there's been some problems that are caused by gas drilling nearby. 3 of his neighbors have had new water wells drilled by the gas driller, but the gas driller won't drill Max a new water well, and he's 81 years old. So I'm fighting for him. I'm fighting for the Mannings, which is another family that have had a set of problems. And a governor who's on the side of people like that actually can fix these problems short of litigation. You can fix these problems.
It doesn't have to get there.
No, you can fix these problems. I can fix this problem on the phone in an afternoon, talking very frankly to the CEO.
You're right.
And I'll tell the CEO, if you're going to do business in Pennsylvania, you've got to treat Pennsylvanians right. And when you make a mistake, you need to fix it. And even if you didn't make a mistake, when we've got somebody who's 81 years old, living without good water, help us get him good water. You'll be a good corporate citizen. That's one of the things you got to do. It's just called human decency.
Yeah, and that's the leverage that the governor should be able to use.
But this governor doesn't want to do it, and you need a Democratic governor who actually understands the business to actually use that leverage in a smart way. And I will get that job done.
A couple weekends ago, we were with a group up here in Erie that is very, very passionate about keeping fracking out of Erie County. And actually, Erie County's in a unique spot where the fracking lines up because we're in a more of a shallow area. So we haven't really been the bullseye for a lot of these gas companies, but you know, when they do eventually roll into the area, we want to be kind of prepared, you know, or they want to be prepared to say, if you're going to do this, then, you know, you really look at all these other problems. And we went down, we saw a farm, it was just south of I-80, and he was a single guy, and so all the gas companies came in and gave them water buffaloes. You know, this is kind of like one of their ways to get around when the wells become infected. And I think that's another good thing to point out is wells are getting infected with some of this methane that's leaking out, you know, and that was, I know, some propaganda that was being spewed out by the industry when it first came in. And the troubling thing was, like, his neighbor, if they got a water buffalo, they had to sign a gag order that says they won't talk to the press, you know.
Well, that's back to this let's get a state office reporting to me, the governor, that will professionally and independently investigate and take on the burden of dealing with the gas drilling companies when there are mistakes and problems. And there have been mistakes and problems. Gas wells have been drilled in a way that has caused methane to migrate. I went to war for the families in Dimock, Pennsylvania.
Right. Dimock is famous.
18 families had water wells contaminated with methane. It wasn't gas drilling liquids coming up from depth, but it was methane in the water because of mistakes in gas drilling, and that's a problem. It's a problem that's big enough to.
Well, look at what happened in West Virginia not only a month ago.
Well, that was the coal.
That was
coal
separate issue, but still.
Yeah, but it's just underlying my point that all of these industries have to be overseen and strongly regulated. But back in Dimock, I won $4.2 million payment for those 18 families, we need a governor who understands this business, understands the environment, and is on the side of people to straighten out problems when they do occur.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you speak to those points. And the new office, I think, is a good idea. And when we went further down into Greene County, and we went to Butler County, and we went to Washington County, and we met with concerned citizens, that was their biggest cry. Was they're not getting anywhere with the DEP. You know, they're not getting anywhere complaining directly to the companies. You know, and the Allegheny National Forest, which is in our backyard out here in Erie, about an hour east. You know, that's obviously national land. But the EPA has been almost seen as facilitating rather than regulating. You know.
Right. So we will have the independent office to receive citizen complaints, and we'll have a new DEP secretary, a new governor, and that changes the game entirely. Entirely.
Sure. Yeah.
And we need to do that, and it's one of the reasons that I'm very different from the Democratic candidates. That's a big difference between me and the other Democratic candidates.
We're coming up to the end of our time here. I just wanted to touch on a couple things on the way out, something you want to speak to, just in terms of differentiating yourself from other candidates. What are some critiques that you have of them in terms of infrastructure and getting Pennsylvania back into the shape that it needs to be in?
Well, I actually have worked on infrastructure, our energy infrastructure and other infrastructure for more than 20 years. I was a commissioner of the Public Utility Commission with Governor Casey.
Right, sure.
And the Public Utility Commission is in charge of our water and sewer infrastructure.
Okay.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
Our gas pipelines, both the ones that go to your home as well as the ones that carry gas in long distances, our electric grid, and that's a hugely important thing.
Yeah.
So I understand
it's becoming dated at this point.
It is, and it's not prepared for some of the storms that we're seeing. We need to quote unquote strengthen it or harden it.
I think Hurricane Sandy was a wake up for a lot of municipalities across the nation.
It was. And so, in terms of my preparation to address those issues, I'm uniquely prepared. The other Democratic candidates don't have that background, that experience, that knowledge, and so that's a very big difference between me and the other candidates. I think one of the things that's important to understand is that these big differences mean that we can win. And sometimes it's said about my campaign is, we like what you're saying, but how are you going to win? And it's a fair question, because we're taking on some of the big money.
Yeah.
The folks who are
you're
just...
taking a lot of lobbyists, a lot of people that don't want to progress this far.
Right, and don't want bold change.
Right.
They want to keep on doing the same old, same old. So it's a fair question. And here's the answer. We need 250,000 votes to win this election in terms of on May 20th. 250,000 votes. And we can get those 250,000 votes by talking with people on shows like this, social media, doing retail events, knocking on doors, making phone calls. We've got a
grassroots
We've got a great
organization.
grassroots team doing all of that. We just need 250,000 votes, and we shock them. You know, wouldn't that be fun? That's all we need, 250,000 votes. And that's a product of actually the fact that very few people bother to vote. And the vote is on May 20th. You've got to be a registered Democrat.
That's a good point to make.
Yeah, you can't vote in the Democratic primary if you're an independent or a Republican. If you want to vote for us, the People's Campaign, you got to be a registered Democrat. Yeah, you still got plenty of time to do that. You can switch easily. So we can win this race. We're rising. Don't believe those folks who say we can't win. Join us and we'll shock them.
That's a good point that you make about not enough people voting, because that's something that I was very passionate about when I was going through college, because I felt like a lot of my peers and people from my generation specifically are ignorant, or they just, don't want to play politics anymore because they feel like it's over their head or that it doesn't affect them personally. And it was something that I always tried to put some backlash against with get out the vote campaigns and contacting your local state rep and getting your voter registration cards, and
well,
making sure
if you want, for example, no longer to run the risk anytime one uses marijuana to be arrested and have your life ruined, you need to vote.
You need to vote.
You need to vote on May 20th. And you need to vote for John Hanger. That will send a message to those folks. If you want to keep gas drilling out of the state forests and the state parks, you need to vote. And you need to vote John Hanger, because I wrote that moratorium. If you want that college affordability plan, 2 years of community college, 1 year of state university, and pay for it out of your earnings, you need to vote.
You need to vote.
And I can go on. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And the good news here is anybody who does vote actually has power, because there are so few people voting. And if you actually ask others to vote for our campaign, which is at hangerforgovernor.com and facebook.com/hangerforgovernor, you have even more power.
So your vote does matter.
Your vote matters,
Your vote
and your
matters.
conversations with family and friend matters.
Yes, yes. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure speaking, and good luck in your candidate or in your campaign, and hopefully we'll have another conversation closer to May, huh?
Let's do it. We're rising fast. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.